for our conversation this morning is coming off of some of the things that was said at yesterday's press conference by the Prime Minister in regards to constitutional reform and Tobago autonomy, because, of course, you cannot speak about changing Tobago's autonomy or anything of that matter without talking about the Constitution. Why? Because pretty much anything that we have within our THA Act as it is subject to Section 75 of the Constitution, which says that the Cabinet needs to have approval over what we do here in Tobago. Every decision that we have to make in terms of policies and stuff must have some Cabinet approval, and it must not contradict what's in the Constitution. So this is extremely important to us here in Tobago, what's going to be happening in the next few months as we see what they're going to be proposing and what comes out of the consultations for the constitutional reform process. Now, to speak to us a little bit about some of those matters here this morning, we are being joined by economist and political commentator analyst, Dr. Vanus James. So special good morning and welcome to you, Dr. James. How are you doing this morning?
Kandace. Happy New Year.
Certainly.
Happy New Year to Tobago too.
Certainly. All right. So now getting into the conversation. So we heard the announcement from Dr. Rowley yesterday about this new drive for constitutional reform. Now, of course, there's been many attempts in the past, but this is the latest one. The last one we had was probably about 2014, somewhere around there. So from what we heard yesterday at the press conference and what Dr. Rowley explained, what are your views at this point in time?
Well, first of all, it's a good move. The country needs constitutional reform.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that, of course, is the reform of governance in Tobago. But as a general matter, we are stuck with our initiatives on diversification because the Constitution is so bad and so inappropriate. So that's the first thing that I think the public ought to think about.
Mm-hmm.
But what this has done is up the ante on Tobago, because you now cannot discuss autonomy in the way we were discussing it before without clarity about what it implies for the structure of the government here and the structure of the government in the country. So I think this is a good move for the country. Now, there are many people who have told me just in the last 24 hours that this is a ruse by Rowley to stretch out the agenda on Tobago autonomy. I doubt that. I think maybe one of the few good decisions the Prime Minister has made in his tenure is this decision. And the country, I think, would make him take it seriously. It would not be something you can use as a ruse. Everybody would participate. All the analysts, all the political speakers, parties and so on would participate in the process of determining what comes of this move.
Now, we know, one of the people that really called for constitutional reform was former Prime Minister Basil Pandey, who recently passed away. But also, I know Mr. Ho Choi Charles, who unfortunately also passed away. He was one of those that called for constitutional reform because he understood what Tobago's autonomy means, or how Tobago's autonomy would really unfold if we had some changes in the Constitution. Now, if you remember some of the things that Mr. Ho Choi Charles was saying, I don't know if you could share some of those things with us as to what he thought, and I know that you were one of those people that worked with him during those times, or what you guys thought was the best way that the Constitution should be formed or should be established that would allow Tobago to have the powers that it is wanting.
Well, what I can say to the public, first of all, regarding Ho Choi and this matter, is an important event in the efforts of Tobago. When we went to the Dispute Resolution Commission, we carried along an agreement with Basil Pandey that if we won the Dispute Resolution Commission case, we would move next immediately to do constitutional reform.
And what year was this?
This was in 1998, 99, even before the case was called. So this would be sometime in 98. And we prepared all the documents. My recollection is there were 7 documents we prepared, including a cover letter, designing the process of the constitutional reform, the role of the Prime Minister, the role of the THA, the role of stakeholders, the way the commission that would pursue that agenda would look, and so on. We developed the whole agenda, and Pandey agreed. So those were in the archives in the PRDI. I don't know if they're still there. But Hochoi lodged copies of the letters and the documents in the PRDI. So this is part of the historical record of the country. Pandey agreed to that. Now, after we won the case, Pandey came over to Tobago with Bobby Hawk and met with myself and Hochoi Charles down in Mount Irving Hotel. And it appears to me, after the meeting, given what they raised, Pandey didn't leave too satisfied with the extent of support, and let me say condescending support, that he could get from Hochoi. So he went ahead and abandoned the project and called the election, essentially, let me put it that way. And he and Hochoi picked fight with one another thereafter. That was, in the whole experience with me, that was the first time I saw a breakup, a breakaway.
Yeah.
Because remember, Pandey came and tried to do the roads and so on,
Yes.
and Hochoi blocked that and all of that. But anyway, all that broke down. So the constitutional reform agenda that Pandey had never took place. And the consequence of that is that he lost his government and thereafter became a outspoken advocate of constitutional reform in the country. But the opportunity was there after we won the Dispute Resolution Commission case, and he didn't follow through. So that's one thing about the Hochoi-Pandey relationship around constitutional reform. Now, regarding my my engagements with Hochoi during the years I worked here for him, and in the recent years as we collaborated on substantive matters, including last year all the way up to July, the broad picture that Hochoi came around to understand that wasn't there under Robinson, and his work with Hochoi's work with Robinson didn't reflect this understanding. But in our work, we came to one fundamental agreement. The basic thing we last agreed on in our meeting in Rovenels with other people, and that was sometime around June, was that the design of the government in Tobago and the design of the government in Trinidad doesn't allow for oversight of the work of the cabinet in Trinidad or oversight of the work of the executive council here. Both, and he was, remember, our first chief secretary.
Yes.
So we got the agreement from him that he would now say, from his experience as chief secretary, that the collective responsibility of the executive council to the assembly, like the collective responsibility of the cabinet to the parliament, is really farcical. There is no mechanism in the constitution to enforce that collective responsibility and accountability and so on.
And I remember clearly that was such an intrinsic part of the conversation with all those consultations that took place from 2013 onwards, and probably even before, about, you know, what we need to have to make sure we have the ideal government that really does work for the people.
Well, you mean you're pointing back to the Kamala effort?
Yes.
Yeah, well, I think this is the point that was misunderstood by Prakash, Ramadan, and his team.
In 2014 and so on.
In 2010 to 2014 under Kamala. I think Prakash and Hamid Ghani took the UNC down the road of proportional representation without addressing this central question, that what you need is a parliament designed in such a way, a House of Representatives, a THA, even the municipal corporations, designed in such a way that the representatives of the people who are not in the executive function must be able to oversee the executive and its activities and make law to ring-fence the activities of the executive. That's not present in the current constitution of the country. It's not present in the THA Act. And the absence of that provision is the major reason we are not getting good decisions made by our governments. We get government with half the information they need, while you need full information government if they're going to make some decisions. The key, of course, is the absence of representative government and the presence of authoritarian executive cabinet government. So I think that is what is going to have to be addressed properly now. We've learned a lot over the decades about this matter of the design of the government. We've learned from our own research. We've learned from the experience of the rest of the world, and curating all that data properly has allowed us to understand now the arithmetic of the design of the government in Tobago and the arithmetic of the design of the government in Trinidad. And the fundamental arithmetic indicates that the Parliament, the House of Representatives in Trinidad, is too small to allow you to get representative, legislative oversight of the cabinet. And the same is true here. The Executive Council, the THA, with 15 elected reps, is too small to allow for representative oversight of the Executive Council. And the absence of that oversight is the fundamental reason Trinidad is making progress while the economy of Tobago collapsed in the last 2 years. It's just the absence of ring fencing of decisions of the Executive Council by non-executive members of a Tobago legislature. But you can't get that set of non-executive members if you only have a council of 15 members, because you need, say, 8 to run the executive function. Now, 7 more don't give you enough members to oversee. So you need a bigger THA than we have now. And that will come up as a major issue in the design of the national constitution, that arithmetic, and it will come up in the reform of the THA under that constitution.
Of course, and I mean, and there you're pointing towards the People's House that was a major component of those bills that was originally sent down.
Well, that raises a separate issue. The People's House story really goes to the need for an elected Senate in the country and an elected Senate in Tobago. The reason you need an elected Senate will come out of these constitutional discussions. We have an appointed Senate in Trinidad now. It is not fit for the purpose for which you need a Senate. What you really need a Senate to do are 2 things. First of all, you need it to take responsibility for the spatial equality of citizens. Tobago's equality of status with Trinidad, but within Trinidad, where does Nariva sit? Where does Pinal sit? You need a Senate to take account of the fact that economic development is very unequal across the country, concentrated in Port of Spain, concentrated in San Fernando, and the rest of the country is just looking on. And you see the same thing in Tobago with the East-West divide. All the development is taking place in Canaan Bonaccord, and you have none going on in Castara and Charlottesville and other places like that. Now you need an elected Senate to address that by giving it responsibility for advice and consent on the development part of our budget. That's true for Trinidad, that's true for Tobago.
All right, and then we're going to have a pause right there. But we're going to continue more with this discussion in just a little bit, but we have to go for a break first. So viewers, please don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Good Morning Tobago on Tobago Updates. Viewers, we are continuing our discussion this morning with economist and political commentator Dr. Vanus, as we discuss the Constitution, the call for constitutional reform. Well, not just the call for the constitutional reform, but the announcement that we are going to, as a country, be getting into constitutional consultations throughout as we look to see what changes we need to make to the Constitution, of course. And that is a very important discussion, because what happens with the Tobago House of Assembly Act, the powers that we are granted under the Tobago House of Assembly, whether it's what we have now or whether it's a self-governance that we are seeking, it's all dependent on what happens or what's outlined in the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago. So you can't have that the Tobago House of Assembly Act or self-governance conversation without having a conversation about the constitutional reform. Now, Dr. James, of course, we were kind of getting into some of just the powers that we need in this country when it comes for accountability, things like that. And we highlighted the fact that the Constitution, as it is right now, does not have much in it by way of holding our executive powers to account for the decisions that they make. And that is something that we're hoping gets in there this time around with these consultations. And are you confident? Are you confident that some of these things will be included or will come up strongly in the consultations that are going to be happening over the next 6 months?
Well, purely because of my own research, there is no chance now that the national conversation will take place without us being aware of the proper design of the House of Representatives in Trinidad, proper design of the THA in Tobago, proper design of the Senate in the country, including the elected Senate, and the proper roles for them, and the proper design of a Senate in Tobago, which you reminded me we were calling the People's House back in 1997-98. So we know so much more now that we won't get hung up on simple things like wanting an elected president, executive president, proportional representation. These are going to just be minor distractions in a real conversation about the way the House of Representatives ought to be configured, the arithmetic. Mm-hmm. We will know, for example, that if we want a cabinet of 15 members, all the studies we've done, all the evidence we have, this is development economics we're talking about here, mm-hmm. the kind of government you need to build a viable economy. We now know that if you're going to have 15 members in the cabinet, you need somewhere near 90 members in the whole of the House of Representatives. And if you're going to have a THA with an executive council of 8 members, then you need somewhere near 42 members in the THA. So you can have effective oversight by the winning party of the executive council and effective oversight by the whole THA of the executive by the non-executive members of the House. And we know that arithmetic for Trinidad and Tobago as well. So this is not going to go down now like it went under Wooding and Hayatali and even under Williams when they didn't know the arithmetic. They didn't understand the issues that way. Even when Robinson was designing the Constitution and young economists like myself tried to draw his attention to these things, he said, you can't eat Constitution. But now we know the details. We also know that in addition to what I was mentioning to you about needing a Senate to deal with equality of status and equality of opportunity across the spatial divides of the country, you need a Senate to deal with the advise and consent matters relating to appointments of public officers like the president, take the prime minister and the chief secretary out of the loop, and hand those responsibilities to an elected Senate that can answer to the people for their decisions. But you then provide proper protection for public servants who are cowed by the executive. Up to last night, senior engineers in Tobago were telling me they're so scared to speak out about the issues because of the worry that there would be victimization by the executive. Well, if you have an elected Senate that takes responsibility for discipline and appointment and so on, public servants need not be afraid in the context of our history of executive decisions, because the executive itself will now have to answer to a legislature that can ring fence its behavior and hold it accountable and protect whistleblowers and stuff like that. All of that is missing properly from our current constitution, but we know all of that now.
Yes.
And can bring that properly into the story.
Now,
so this is going to be a very different discussion.
I mean, I also want to touch on the matter of jurisdiction, right? Now, I mean, the jurisdiction can be in so many different ways, whether it's the lawmaking powers, whether it's policies, but more importantly, what we've had quite a big concern in Tobago is that of just our physical boundaries. And there is quite a lot of back and forth, and we saw it especially, it came to a head during the Joint Select Committee meetings in 2021, where there was that back and forth about how do you really define Tobago, because you can't talk about having powers without having boundaries or jurisdiction, so to speak, of where you can execute those powers. Do you think now that these constitutional consultations would now consider how do we define the different parts of Trinidad and Tobago? Because, I mean, we had to talk about defining Trinidad as well, because Port of Spain is different from San Fernando, is different from Mayaro, and all those different places as well.
The THA Act, as it stands, defines Tobago. But it defines Tobago the wrong way, because it defines Tobago with a 6 nautical mile limit out from its shorelines. These conversations, if we conduct ourselves properly in Tobago, our contribution to the discussion about the Constitution, which we would have had to make anyway, can now be made after we have had a thorough dialogue in Tobago about all the fundamental issues. And I think we're in a strong position in Tobago because we've been discussing constitutional reform and researching it for in a kind of way, in a more involved way than Trinidad has been. So we will be able to bring light to the reasons you need proper boundaries for Tobago that are not affected in any way by the law of the sea, international law of the sea. And what is the advantage to the country to use the median line between Tobago and Trinidad to define Tobago and to define Trinidad? There are advantages to the nation. The simplest one to think about is that Trinidad is preoccupied with the energy sector.
Yes.
They're busy making deals with Venezuela and so on. The whole idea of their future in the psyche of the Trinidadian is keep the oil and gas industry afloat somehow, even in the context of climate change. Tobago has long been liberated from that preoccupation. We have the psychology and can build the expertise to deal with the entire blue economy, concerns of the nation, if Tobago is properly defined. There's a whole set of blue economy issues, including seabed minerals, that are relevant to the definition of Tobago.
And particularly, let's say, even defining our marine parks and be able to control it, because, I mean, we often complain about how some of our tour guides or the tour operators, the reef tours, they take advantage. They're destroying in some parts of our reef and so on. And we know what can happen if we destroy the reefs. So,
but you know, if the point though is that if we properly prosecute our dialogue in Tobago, we don't need to wait on Port of Spain.
Yes.
We can set up our own consultations here. And we can, before June, hold our own constitutional convention here in Tobago. Autonomy convention, call it what you will. That would allow us as a people to go to the national conversation about the Constitution with what Hocho used to call one voice.
Yes.
And that would put the country on notice that there are serious thinkers in Tobago who could teach the nation something. I know pretty much all those people on the commission, and I could tell you, they've never worked out the arithmetic that I was just describing for you. So we will be able to bring all of that to the national conversation as Tobago's contribution to the national dialogue about how it should configure its government. We will be able to speak to the way they should set up the local government bodies in Trinidad, the way the THA should be set up, and the way the national government should be set up. And all of that would bring in the issues you're raising about jurisdiction and so on. Let me make a point on that, for example. The general attitude of the two bills that are in Parliament and the general attitude of the THA Act about the responsibilities of the central government is the wrong attitude. The THA Act exemplifies it well, because what it does is it says, Tobago, we the people of Trinidad and Tobago are assigning you responsibility for fifth schedule matters. We limit you to those, and all the rest of the responsibilities are those of the national government. Well, it should be the other way around. Tobago should be able to say to the country, this is what we need the national government to do for us. Here is the schedule for the national government. Everything else is Tobago people's business. All the reserved powers, not expressed in any of the restrictions we are imposing on you to take responsibility for national defense and all of these things, we give you those. But when it comes to anything we forget, that's Tobago's business. That is the way we're going to build a constitution that allows for harmonious development of the country going forward. Because we are the ones who will be studying all the possibilities for development in Tobago. And when there is something missing in the constitution, it has to be assumed that if we discover that there is an element there that we need to address, we don't need to go to Trinidad to ask for permission on it, because the reserve powers are our powers. That sort of stuff is going to come out in the conversation if we do our business the right way here. Now, I have to say, there is no great inclination that I see in the existing THA to handle these consultations in Tobago properly. But the pressure will now come on the government here to do that.
Certainly.
To set up the consultations in a proper way, have proper conversations between Farley and Kelvin, sort out the way we're going to go with this, tell the people at Tobago up front early, get a team that is competent. Rowley gave a good example of the way you have to approach it. You have to appoint a competent team, whatever its political flavor, that can address the issues, including in the case of Tobago, framing our conception of the constitutional amendments and the form of the THA Act that we would be responsible to establish. Can I just make one more point, please?
So,
you won't go on a break. Let me just make this point. In the case of this conversation, the country is going to have to confront the idea that the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago should not contain any law relating to how Tobago should set up its government. It should give us the permission to set up the government, and we, in a time schedule set in the Constitution, must come here and define the kind of governance we need. That is the key.
Now,
thing.
I want to end our conversation on this point. Now, we had an announcement yesterday about that constitutional reform trust that we're going to be embarking on for the next 6 months. And we also had a commitment from Prime Minister a couple of weeks ago that the sub-governance bills are going to be dealt with in this session of Parliament. So, my question to you now is, do you think now that we should wait until the constitutional reform conversation is concluded before we deal with the sub-governance bills? You know, how should we approach that now that constitutional reform is in the mix?
Not before.
Okay.
While we're dealing with it. We need the country to be properly organized for Tobago to make progress. And we need the THA to be properly organized, the government in Tobago to be properly organized for Tobago to make progress. These conversations should go on simultaneously. So the THA should take the step to set up our conversations here now and allow us to educate the country about the direction in which we should go here and the direction in which Trinidad should go. And that will be the best way for Tobago to help the nation to deal with the issues.
So I'm getting a cue that we actually have a few more minutes. Yeah. we can continue speaking. And I want to dive more into you know, how we should be treating the self-governance issue going forward. Now, we heard from the Chief Secretary last few days that he is coming up with this list that was actually quite a lot of the work that Mr. Hochul Charles did before his passing, of the differences between what Tobago originally proposed, basically what went down as bills in 2018 to the cabinet, and then what was then produced in Parliament and what is sitting in Parliament right now. So sending that information down to the parliamentarians so that they can consider it as they go forward with that process. Do you support this idea? What is your view?
Well, that just demonstrates the limitations of Fali himself. These issues are so profound and so important for the people of Tobago that it makes almost zero sense to take anything done by Hochul and his group, whoever they are, without any serious dialogue and learning from the people of Tobago and send that to Port of Spain. And now in the context of Rowley's move, that would be a huge error. Tobago must seize the opportunity now, and Fali must take the opportunity to learn from the records of history that you have to be thoughtful about whatever you're doing. Because where we are now with what Rowley is doing there, those two bills in the parliament are moot. They're not particularly relevant anymore. Rowley has changed the equation. And essentially what he's saying is, to deal with the Tobago governance issues, we must deal with the whole thing. I think that is the right answer. It's a better answer than what Fali has in mind. And Fali would be well advised. So let's set up a proper conversation in Tobago that could educate Tobago and the nation. We are half the nation. with more of the blue economy space than Trinidad. So we have plenty of responsibilities here. And we need to be careful in what we do. We have to ensure that we lead because we are half. Just like Trinidad had been assumed to be big brother and calling us little sister for years, now we get the chance to operate as the deep thinkers and educate the nation about the way this should go. They don't really understand constitutional reform in Trinidad, I could tell you. We understand it here, and the opportunity must be provided here. If Fali doesn't provide it, the rest of us would seize it. Well, people know I will speak out on it anyway.
And that's very interesting that, you know, we might be seeing in the next few months Tobago leading those discussions, because we have been speaking about it for the last, I don't know how many decades.
That's right. And what Fali should do is set up his own convention. Forget about Rowley. Rowley is doing what he has to do down there. That's Trinidad. But we should set up our own process, conversations in Tobago, giving everybody, whatever their thoughts, a chance to come to the table again, especially young people. And let all of that culminate in a full-fledged conversation to which we invite the whole nation. And when we set up the conversation here, the whole nation is invited to come as well, so they can learn. And when we finish talking here, that would be a major lesson in good governance for Trinidad.
Certainly. I know I want to ask you as well, like, do you think that, you know, I mean, like I said, we've been having these discussions for several decades, but do you think that this time around, you know, would people be interested, or would they be like, you know what, we had this discussion so many times before, I'm not interested? People
have always been interested. Ever since this started, the real start of this conversation was under C.L.R. James's work when he was part of the PNM. And he wrote those two classic pieces, Party Politics in the West Indies, and Every Cook Can Govern. And he was basically saying to Williams what we have to say today. You have to set up the government so the people have an opportunity to participate in the process of making law. That is exactly what NJAC was saying in 1970, for example. Wooding didn't understand it that way. Hayatali didn't get it that way. Robbie didn't get it that way. But we've always known, ever since CLR, that that's the hardcore of the answer, what NJAC was calling power to the people. We own the country, and the current constitution and the current THA Act gives the wrong impression to the citizens that the government owns the country. But we know that we, the citizens, are the owners, and we must be able to ring-fence the behavior of the executive, which is the enemy in all of this. It is they who have all your money, all your guns, all your contacts, and so on. And it is they and their behavior that must be ring-fenced by proper representative government. So we will learn that in a proper conversation in Tobago, where development economists like myself, who studied this issue for a career, would be able to bring proper research results to the society via substantive conversations we hold here. That's a way for Tobago to lead, and I hope, without being able to tell him so to his face, I hope Farley and the Executive Council are listening, because this will not be a conversation led by people who don't know the facts.
Yes.
This is an opportunity for all of us, and Rowley is right on it. We're going to set up an opportunity for the whole country to talk about it. And people like me will be able to bring all the research results to that conversation.
It's certainly something to look forward to. The next 6 months are really going to be interesting. But guess what? We at Tobago Update, and certainly with myself, we are going to make sure that we can help you understand, viewers, every step of the way as we go through and discuss the various viewpoints, because we know a whole lot is going to come out. And Tobago is not going to let us down as we go through all of this, while we are also dealing with the self-governance bills. Quite a lot to happen by June 2024. So yeah, lot to look forward to. So thank you again for joining us. Thank you, of course, Dr. James, for being here with us and having this conversation. And viewers, hope you have a safe and wonderful weekend, and we see you again tomorrow. And of course, thanks to Comfort Inn and Suites for allowing us to be here. Bye for now.